Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to do our third winter 2023-2024 look ahead. Now, in last week's video we had a look at the various Copernicus charts, but the base time was August. So it was data that we had in August, and it showed the mean sea level pressure, precipitation and temperatures throughout the various months ahead, which included at least the start of winter 2023-2024. Now, in today's video, we're going to have a look at a lot of the same charts, but the base time is now September, so it's a month ahead. So we have new start time data, and it'll be very interesting to see if we have continued trends from last week and from last month's data, which did show the potential for some colder weather, some more blocked weather perhaps, as we headed into the new year. Now, I have already had a look at these various charts, and while it doesn't say it's definitely going to happen, and there's no chance we can say that anything will definitely happen, the trends, I must say, are still there, if not even stronger, for January and February time for blocked and potentially colder weather. Now, we are getting closer to winter, so hopefully this data gets more and more accurate as we do progress, and it is looking like that perhaps late autumn, maybe even into December, is looking quite westerly, I must say. But these models are definitely showing a flip around the new year to some substantial blocking, and the consistency we're seeing not only between the months now, the August data and September data is pretty similar, but also between the various models, which do have different levels of reliability. Again, none of these longer range runs are that reliable because they are so far in the future. But the fact that we are seeing this consistency indicating there is something there that the models are latching onto to show perhaps a very cold start to the new year, or at least middle to second half of the winter. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, I'll start on the mean sea level pressure for some various charts on Copernicus. And we'll start in the Met Office. So whenever we hear a long-term Met Office forecast, or we're looking at their planners for the months ahead, this data that we're seeing now will be used. Again, they may have higher resolution data, they may have data that goes out in the longer term, and they may have internal data that isn't published publicly. But this is what we've got from the Met Office, and it shows you the mean sea level pressure percentages for individual months going all the way to February. So anything showing blues is above 50% chance of seeing low pressure dominate, yellows, oranges and reds indicating higher pressure. So this is mean sea level pressure, and it indicates sort of the wind direction and generally the air masses. Now we can see here through October, we can see the UK here, it's pretty much towards the centre, top of the screen. It's got high pressure to the north, low pressure to the south. And this is what we have seen a little bit over the last sort of couple of weeks, with drawing up a southerly wind, but still having plenty of low pressure out in the Atlantic, showing a westerly flow, trying to break through, but seeing bouts of higher pressure. November, looks like that low pressure breaks through, and it's a very westerly based month. Could be quite mild as well, with that wind coming up more from a southwesterly direction. It could be really, really quite windy and wet there. December looks like that will continue. But interestingly, from the Met Office, we have got high pressure building up towards Scandinavia. So it could be a bit of either. There's two possible options here. It could be a transitional month, i.e. the start of the month most likely will be very westerly and unsettled. And the second half of the month towards the Christmas period, perhaps we could see high pressure build in towards our north and east. And the way this is factored, because it is of course over the course of a month, this is how it shows, but instead it would be a month of two halves, perhaps a mild, wet and windy start to the month and a cold, blocked second half of the month. The other solution is that it's a battleground situation, i.e. these two things going on at the same time. We've got high pressure out to our east, we've got low pressure to the west. The westerly winds are trying to beat out the easterly winds coming out from Scandinavia. Now, from the looks of this, the westerlies would win out, but it would be a very interesting time to be watching the models, as I suspect we'd see a lot of flipping and changing, a lot of very cold runs, and a lot of very mild runs if this pattern came off. But the interesting thing happens as we head into the new year. And the Met Office isn't as bullish with this as some other runs we'll see in a minute, but it does continue that high pressure towards Scandinavia. Weaker signal, but you can see out to our west, the low pressure signal disintegrates quite significantly. Not nil, there is still some lighter blues appearing towards northeast Canada, just to the south of Iceland, but a huge change to what we had the prior months. And we move to February, you can see substantial blocking towards the northeast of Canada, southern Greenland, Iceland across to Scandinavia, low pressure well to the south, so southerly tracking jet, and you'd expect to be seeing northerly easterly winds with this sort of pattern. Could be very cold and potentially very snowy as well if we did start to see these lows approach from the southwest. You can see all across the Met we're seeing low pressure, and that's a pretty typical pattern for when we've got colder weather towards northern and western Europe. It's very interesting seeing the Met Office backing up what we saw from last week, showing substantial blocking at times here, most likely in February. January, bit of a mixed month, perhaps a transition. Same with December. So December, January could be touch and go. February, very strong signal here for blocks, colder weather. And after you look at the ECMWF, now we did actually have a look at this data last week on the actual ECMWF website, so we'll run through it quite quickly, but I did still want to show it just so we can compare to the other charts. October, wet and windy, loads of low pressure dominating, high pressure actually to our north, trying to push that jet stream further southwards, but it's not going to really do much. We're actually going to stay very unsettled. November, another very unsettled month, a bit of blocking towards northeast Canada. Again, probably would only affect the United States, but could have a bit more of a wavy downstream effect on the UK, but here we're generally unsettled. December, not looking like the Met Office run, which had high pressure up towards Scandinavia, but instead has loads of low pressure. A bit of a mid-Atlantic ridge, so could have a bit of polar maritime air masses moving in at times, i.e. the air taking a very long sea track, or very cold air originating from Greenland, making a very long sea track journey through the North Atlantic, so warming up substantially, but could still bring cold, perhaps some wintry showers in places. January, though, huge flip, even bigger a flip than the Met Office showed. Huge, substantial blocking over much of the northern hemisphere, in fact, with a big lobe, one of the darkest patches in the northern hemisphere here, over Iceland, Greenland, with, look at that, blues down towards the Med. So very similar to past the Met Office. Met Office had it starting in February, here January, showing easterly winds, very cold conditions. And finally, February, that pattern continues. Substantial blocking to the north. Interestingly, the blues do approach the UK, but still to our south. So this could be a bit more of a snowy battleground month. Northerly winds trying to push in, with low pressure trying to come in off the Atlantic, and we could be caught in that gap where it is cold but also unsettled, and there we could see substantial snowfall. So very interesting seeing that once again. Eastern UF very cold through both January and February. If we look at the JMA run, this is the Japanese run, you can see high pressure over the top for October, so a bit of a difference to the other runs, which should have more low pressure dominating. November, westerly, a bit of high pressure towards Scandinavia, but wouldn't expect that to impact us too much. Could be a little bit of battleground, but November it's very difficult to get substantially cold weather. So unless that was a proper raw easterly, it probably would just slow the lows down and introduce some slightly cooler air. December, a westerly fest. Biggest westerly fest we've seen so far, in fact, because we've got high pressure to the south towards Spain, low pressure out to the North Atlantic, very strong jet, and coming from sort of southwesterly direction, so it'll be mild, wet and windy for December. January, a little bit of a change, but nothing crazy. Low pressure still to our north, but more of a mid-Atlantic ridge, so again would encourage more polar maritime air masses and perhaps transient northerlies, but because the high pressure doesn't get towards Greenland or Iceland here, it wouldn't be anything substantially cold or blocked. And finally, into February, then we see the flip. That is the same as the other two runs. High pressure up to our north, easterly winds. Again, we can't say this will definitely be cold because there is quite a substantial lobe of low pressure. And it's difficult to say whether this is actually a tropospheric polar vortex that's been displaced out of the Arctic by all this high pressure, whether actually is just more of a continuation of a jet stream and lows have got trapped. So can't say exactly what this is showing, but this would generally be a colder, drier, blocked pattern. And of course, low pressure coming in could produce snowfall. Now, finally, the DWD run. This is the German run. And you can see again here for much of October, very unsettled and pretty horrible, really. The same for November, high pressure to the east and south, westerly winds, very strong, unsettled, mild conditions. As we head into December, a bit of a mid-Atlantic ridge, but more west-based, so might not affect us, but could affect us marginally at times. A bit of blocking towards Greenland, but again, nothing substantial enough to say this is a cold pattern. Most likely, a bit of a wavy jet stream, colder at times, but still generally unsettled through December. January, a bit of a change, more high pressure signals towards Greenland and northern Canada, Scandinavia as well, but still some lighter blues, a bit of a mix. This could probably be just a month of kind of mishmash of different patterns, some blocking patterns at times, but equally some westerly based unsettled patterns. So we'll just have to see what that would entail. And finally, February, the same as the other runs, a massive flip to major blocking, probably the strongest signal for blocking here through not much of the northern hemisphere. This would be very cold, potentially very snowy with the low pressure approaching from the southwest. And yeah, it's pretty much the same as the other runs. Now we can mishmash this all together by having a look at the multi-systemed run. So this has got all the various charts: Eastern WF, Met Office, Meteo France, CMCC, DWD, NCP, JMA, ECCC. Now, this doesn't, of course, this got runs we haven't looked at individually, but it weights all of these together and gives a percentage from all the models. So this is probably the most important chart to look at. Again, it probably has fairly weak anomalies, simply because a very positive anomaly and a very negative anomaly would cancel each other out. So it's likely to have fairly weak anomalies, but it'd be very interesting to see what this does show. October, Westerly Fest, that's what we've seen from a majority, but not all of the models so far. November, again, perhaps that high pressure building up towards Scandinavia, but still plenty of low pressure to our west, so fairly unsettled and mild. December, some runs have showed some blocking towards Scandinavia, but here, with all of them put together, a generally unsettled pattern. You could probably try and trace the jet here into the north of Greenland and then dipping southwards through Iceland towards the United Kingdom. So it could be a bit of a northerly, meandering jet stream. That could imply some northerly winds at times, but again, nothing that cold, just traditional transient northerlies, a few snow showers here or there before it moves away, lasting 24 to 48 hours. So there is the potential there, but here, really not looking at anything cold at all. Mostly low pressure dominating, plenty of rainfall and windy weather. January, we start to see a little bit of a flip. Low pressure more to the south, towards the Med, and down towards North Africa, down towards the parts of Asia now, into the Middle East. But you can see so low pressure down towards the Mediterranean, eastern Mediterranean here, towards the Black Sea as well. But interestingly, towards Iceland and southern Greenland, a small but still fairly significant area of yellow, implying higher pressure potentially developing. Now this would start to bring the risk of northerly winds, perhaps more blocked weather. It's not massive, it's not a massive anomaly, but as I said, it is probably due to the fact there are a few major negative anomalies, major low pressure anomalies, cancelling that positive anomaly out. And if we do have a look at finally at February, look at that, a substantial yellow through the northern hemisphere. Again, not darker colours through the northern hemisphere, so not huge confidence, but it shows you that majority are showing blocking through February, or showing an above average chance of mean sea level pressure being higher than what you'd expect. Therefore, again, potentially for northerly winds, easterly winds, you can see it's sort of a blanket yellow through much of the northern hemisphere, which wouldn't happen in reality. So you can't have a complete massive area of high pressure over the northern hemisphere. There will be areas of low pressure, but it would give a generally blocked and cold setup. Very interesting seeing that. And again, continues those trends of perhaps some colder weather as we head into the new year, January, February time. At the moment, there is the possibility in December. As I said, there are some runs showing some sort of transient patterns, but no strong signals, which we are seeing for January and February. Now, for the second half of the video, we'll have a look at the 10 HPA wind speed. So this is looking at the polar vortex. And again, this could be a factor, but as we'll see here, I don't think it is. There is the risk that the polar vortex can have some stratospheric warming, which can introduce blocking patterns or encourage blocking patterns, and it can disrupt the westerly flow. But from the looks of this, apart from the run we're seeing here, the DWD run, most are around average, maybe slightly weaker, but not significant enough to give that big blocking signal we're seeing in January and February. But we'll look at it anyway to see what trends we're seeing. Now, the DWD run is extremely weak through much of the winter. The majority of the ensemble members are below the black line, which is the climatology value, which is, pretty remarkable. Which is remarkable, to see that. And you can see many of the runs are very weak, and some are even below zero as we head into the new year, indicating a sudden stratospheric warming. Now, this wouldn't affect the January or February weather. This would be February, March time. And again, it's not all runs showing it, so I do think this is a little bit of an anomalous run showing this low. But if this did come off, we could be in store for an incredibly blocked and cold winter. If the polar vortex was this week or winter, which I don't think it could happen, the chance of it happening very, very, very low. But if it did happen, it would be very interesting to see what we would come out with. Now, if we have a look at the Eastern WF, you see a bit more of a realistic run here, slightly below average, especially to the longer term, against chances of an SSW into the new year, but really not seeing anything too significant here. Definitely still showing slightly below average, as I said, but nothing significant enough to give that strong of a blocking signal into the new year. And then finally, we'll have a look at the JMA, slightly below towards the start of the winter, actually slightly above as we head into the new year. Again, that traditionally wouldn't encourage blocking patterns into the new year. That would probably discourage it and perhaps encourage it slightly in the early parts of winter. So what I'm seeing here, what I'm sort of inferring, is that the polar vortex and what it is showing, the models, that's not what the models are picking up on. They're picking up on something else. Could be to do with the ENSO, which we did have a look in our first winter update, so do check that out, the first winter look ahead, so do check that out if you're interested, as the current state of the ENSO would encourage, or traditionally and statistically would encourage, colder, blocked weather into the new year. So we will have to see. Finally, for the 10 HPA, this is the Met Office run. Again, weaker during the early parts of the winter, strengthening into the new year, and then having a bit of a quicker weakening as we head into late winter, early spring. So again, nothing too substantial. Now, the final chart I want to have a look at on this winter look ahead, because remember, all these charts we've looked at are mean sea level pressure, so it's pressure charts showing you generally where the wind direction would be coming from, but it's got nothing to do with actual temperatures, which I'm sure many people would be interested. Now, the main reason why we don't show temperatures on these winter look aheads is because the longer range charts are pretty biased towards positive anomalies. Now, again, we will get into the whole climate change debate, as I know probably people watching this will have different opinions on both what is going on and, of course, on the strategy and all the political side of it. But it is a fact that the globe has warmed by at least a degree now, heading towards about 1.5 degrees. So the models are going to be positive compared to the averages that they do have. So we are traditionally going to see reds whenever we look at the temperature charts, and these are the 850 HPA temperature charts. So what we have a look at our sort of normal daily videos when we're looking at the upper air temperatures. And remember, when we're looking at sort of snow, we're looking at -5, isotherm down towards sort of -10, and -10 and below would start to give temperatures widely below freezing. Now, these are anomalies, so we're not looking at the raw temperatures here, but the average as we head into winter come February time is around the -3 or -4 mark. Earlier in the winter, it's around the freezing mark before slowly climbing through March and April. So we do peak the coldest sort of average upper air temperatures around the -3 or -4 mark through January and February. So just to remember that when we're looking at this. But remember, it's mostly oranges and reds here. So if we even saw a neutral anomaly, that would give us some indications. In October, positive, moderately positive, nothing crazy. If you look into November, still pretty positive, and you could see a bit of a cooler pool into the North Atlantic. And what I can infer from this is generally we're going to see northerly winds coming out of the North Atlantic, out of south of Greenland, fueling low pressure systems as they hit the UK. So warm air drawn up from the Mid-Atlantic, cold air drawn from the Greenland and Arctic, and it's just going to spiral up these lows. That's what we can really see from these charts. And again, that would produce a very strong westerly flow. December, still got that pattern, and that's why we were still seeing, and that sort of follows on still from that sort of westerly based pattern. As we head towards January, a little bit more neutral, perhaps a slight cooler area past Central Europe, but nothing significant at all. You'd infer here is average to slightly above average. But very interestingly, into February, we see a big area of neutral anomaly appearing towards Scandinavia, out towards Svalbard perhaps, and Iceland, that sort of sector. And that would indicate perhaps northerly or northeasterly winds exiting out of the Arctic. Now remember, this is a neutral anomaly. It's not producing anything that cold, but if we look at the whole chart, there's hardly a bit of blue on the whole planet at this stage. So we've got to sort of look at it statistically. Anything white here, sort of neutral, will probably be cooler than average. We have a look at this because of the biases and because of how it is set up. So that would definitely follow on from what we saw from the other various charts of cold air exiting out of the Arctic and trying to push towards the UK. So it's been very interesting looking at these various charts. Of course, the Copernicus won't update one again until early October. So for the next couple of weeks, we'll either have a look at some other data. We'll skip out a couple of weeks. I don't know. I'll have a look and sort of reassess next week. We may have a look at the QBO. We haven't had a look at that yet, and we may do an update on the ENSO as well, as that will be interesting to see how that has developed as well. But the latest Copernicus data is indicating that the risk of a cold start to 2024 is still there, definitely in January and perhaps more significantly in February. It is still 4-5 months away, so the data is fairly weak, but it is looking extremely interesting throughout this winter. Big contrast to last year, where in our winter look aheads we had a very strong signal for a cold start to the winter, and we did see that. It wasn't widespread, sort of month-long cold. It was about a 2-week spell in early December, so the models perhaps over-amplified it a little bit in terms of its longevity, but it was very severe, it was very cold, and we were well below average for about 2 weeks before things turned much milder around the Christmas period, putting us back up towards average, if not actually slightly above for December in the end. So it'll be very interesting to see if the models are performing well again this year, and they do have a strong consensus for early 2024 colder weather. As I said, it'll be very interesting to see the next Copernicus update if these patterns do continue. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you have enjoyed. Make sure you check out these websites if you are interested. There are other models here, and there are the different sort of charts to show as well. But these are the ones most relevant and easiest to understand for the winter period. As I said, thanks for watching. Hope you have enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.